How we doing? We're good, we're good. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Feels like I should have done something else. I will start this week's episode off by saying I've tried to do this intro many times and I failed. So thank you very much for joining us. My name is Sebastian, and this week we are up to the very last installment of The Gate and a small little fence. Where we left off, we had just got the gate set up. I put some hinges on. This week we're going to make some tweaks and then we're going to put the final slats on. Anyway, let's jump right into it. Anyway, these gate hinges that I am using here are really so that I can lift the gate completely off. But the problem is there's not a lot of relief around them. There is a spigot pinion that goes in and it rubs up against the side of the gate. I don't know whether that's a design fault or whether I've installed it incorrectly, but I've made some modifications. I'm using the multi-tool to carve out a relief at the very top of the hinge, and then you'll see later on I'll come down the side. I'm kneeling on a garden kneeling pad. One thing to protect when you're doing any sort of work are your knees, mainly because it actually gets hard to get up from that kneeling position. And as you get older, the more wear you have on your knees, the harder that gets. And of course, you don't want to fall over whilst trying to get up. I also wear gloves and I also wear a respirator and earmuffs. I see a lot of people who don't wear gloves, and in certain circumstances it's not a good idea. Anything to do with something that grabs and pulls. A miter saw, you could be okay. You've just got to be a little bit careful because that blade will catch something and it will rip it, and whatever you've got inside that thing, like your hand, will go in, and it happens so quickly that you're kind of powerless to stop it, and you could hurt yourself very, very badly. Here I'm marking out another small little relief on the side. Trying to get this nice and tidy with a multi-tool isn't that easy. Multi-tools are great for doing simple work, I've found, but they're not so great for delicate jobs. This one has a bit of power to it, but it's also quite heavy and quite bulky. You can get smaller ones, but they probably don't have the same degree of power. And I like using this, but for some reason, you go through many, many blades. I have a set of really cheap chisels. Trying to get these chisels sharp is difficult. I don't have a lot of experience in sharpening chisels, and I've watched lots of videos on how to do it, and I've got the little sharpening kit that comes with it. It's not that great. At some point in the future I'll upgrade to nicer chisels and probably a sharpening set. A lot of the times I need chisels, I'm really just hogging out material, so I'm not too worried. Some chisels I have, such as this one, which you might actually not be able to see that well. I'll turn this light on. The lighting's so much better with one more light on. This chisel here is one of the chisels that I've got. I've got quite a few of them, but they're all pretty rusty. So I do have a set of those Stanley chisels that aren't so rusty, and they're fairly sharp as well. Now I'm getting the track saw ready. When we left last week's episode, I had to cut a small little relief in the back of the gate, and I just need to cut that relief so that when the gate closes, it doesn't close and leaves a little gap. You'll also notice that the screws are still in the gate. Last week I took the screws out. I was worried that the blade would hit those screws, and they're pretty full-on screws. But when I did it this morning, I could see exactly where the screws were, and I knew the depth, so I knew that I'd be okay. In this shot, the track saw actually got stuck. And I have found that this track saw does get stuck a lot more at the beginning. And it's not that great when they do get stuck, because you are always kind of doing this kind of weird stretchy thing. Track saws are really great to use. I am not ripping lots and lots of long pieces, so I only have a small track. But I may be moving into a new workshop. I might need to get a longer track because I'll have to break down larger pieces of wood. It left a small little bit along the bottom of the gate, so I came along there with the chisel and gave it a bit of a cut. Now I get to put the gate back in place. I'm just screwing them all together, and I just want to check the alignment just to make sure it closes properly. A lot of outdoor furniture take on water, and when wood takes on water, it swells. So if you've ever got a situation, especially when the seasons change, your front door might get stuck, or one of the doors that are exposed to the outside elements, they can get stiff when it's in the jam, and that's simply because it's taking on water. And a lot of people adjust doors by taking them off and cutting the bottom or the sides, which has a tendency to expose that edge, and it can take on water, and that can cause the swelling. So if you're ever in that situation, try to find some varnish, polyurethane or a poly, and seal it just so that the water can't get in and swell it again. But make sure you do it when it's dry. It's always a tricky thing to get a door dry. As I was editing this, I was trying to figure out, why am I cutting these pieces for the small fence? Because I'd already done it in last week's video, which was a few days earlier than this. I don't know why I'm cutting them again. I definitely had cut them, and here I am doing it all over again. I would say that having a miter stand, a miter saw stand, is a lot better than being on the ground. I'm glad that I've got this workshop table, and I can literally put it up, and so I can see, and I'm not crouching down. It's easier to get away from a tool if you are standing up than if you're crouching down, in case something goes wrong. So I haven't got a miter stand. I used to have a miter stand for my old miter saw, but not for this one. This one probably going to not get a stand for, because I might buy another miter stand for taking on jobs. I don't mind this, but it is quite heavy, and it's not very nice to... I'm a small person, so I struggle with lifting this kind of stuff. Have I confused you in anything that I've said or shown? If so, pop a comment down below, and also let me know if you would like to build one of these gates or need to do a repair on your gate. I can give you some tips if you like. Now I'm putting together the small fence. I'm just trying to get it nice and level. The small fence on the side there is really just to complete the fence. It doesn't serve any structural purpose. And here's a little bit of a trick for when you are screwing in screws in a hard to reach place. As you can see, I've started the screw going straight, and then I've only gone in maybe 1/4 of an inch or 5 to 7 mils, and then once I'm in, it's bedded in, and then I twist the drill or the impact driver and the screw to the angle that I'm after. It means that if you try to do it on an angle to start with, you just end up sliding across the screw, and that can actually cause you to misalign, which trust me, that happens quite a bit. Trying to get the mouse going with the small little mouse thing on the thing here. These small fence pieces will make up some structural support for the gate. This gate is really just to stop people from walking down the back of this property and then climbing over, because obviously there is a big gap there. So we've measured the bottom piece, and now we're going to put in the middle piece. Now I've just angled those screws in so it can screw into that post, and obviously on the other side those screws are going directly into the fence that's there. And this now has given this whole post a lot more rigidity. It is actually quite rigid. It's not only in concrete, but it's got those three, I think there were 3 bolts coming out of it, so it's quite securely stuck in that concrete and it doesn't need to move. If for any reason someone decides to climb on that fence, they're not going to break it. I don't know why you would want to climb on it. And of course, one thing that someone asked me is, what do the cats do? Well, the cats do actually climb over the fence now. They also climb up the fence that's right next door as well. I'm now measuring for the slats. I want to make sure that the slats are all on the same level at the very bottom, so it doesn't look like it's like tilted in one particular way. It's not out of level. I'm marking in some of these planks. These are planks that I got from a recycled fence, and I'm just getting the length right, tidying up both ends. I cut a lot of this, and I've actually, you can't see it, but underneath the camera there's more of it, and outside, even though it's pouring down with rain, outside there's a stack of them still there. And these pieces of wood are H3, which in New Zealand means that it can get wet and it won't rot. It does get mold on it for some reason, but it's not supposed to rot like wood would. Here's a small piece of MDF. If I put this outside, other than swelling up, it would rot and decompose. So I bring in the table saw. Table saws are really important to get flat. You don't want to go crazy, but you do want to keep it flat, because table saws are super dangerous. They are spinning very fast, and a lot of them are quite powerful. They're meant to be powerful because it's got to cut through some pretty heavy wood. I'm lining up the fence. I probably should have put the camera on the other side so you can see it actually cutting, but there is actually another camera looking at this, which I will show you. And then I've turned on the saw, and now I'm pushing through the wood. Now I am wearing gloves simply because this is H3. It has got a lot of chemicals in it, and I am going to be doing a lot of pushing it through. If I was cutting it once, I probably would have taken the gloves off. So it is a bit of a mixture of making sure that I'm not absorbing dangerous chemicals through my hands, or making sure my hands don't get caught in the blade. So I always have to make sure that I know what I'm trying to do and how can I do it the most safest possible way. So what I had to do with a lot of these pieces of wood is cut one edge, which was close to the very edge of the paling that I'm cutting, to make sure that both sides of the slat was cut, because it's rough sawn timber. One side's going to be rough sawn in the final product, and then the other two sides of the slat is going to be cut or sawn. In order for me to be able to do this safely, I do actually push the wood halfway through, walk around to the other side of the saw, and then pull the rest through. I do have to be careful as well, because I've got to make sure that the table saw doesn't tip towards me. And if the wood is getting stuck in any particular way, which it didn't in this case, but if it did, I would have to lift the wood out and then walk around and stop the saw. Just try to be as safe as I possibly can. There could be better ways of doing this, but on a small contractor saw, it's a Ryobi, so you know it's not the highest quality, but it does the job. You've just got to make sure that you stay safe. I still have quite a few of them left. I probably should have used the larger tarpaulin to cover all the sawdust. The sawdust that's coming off this wood isn't really going to damage the grass, but it just means that I've got a lot more to clean up. If you're enjoying this week's video, give it a like, and while you're at it, maybe you could subscribe to my channel. And I've got my big bundle of slats. Now I'm going to start installing them. I only pulled the camera around when I was halfway through the gate, but I'll describe to you how this works. I basically put up a blank one. This is just one of the ones that I made. And then I grab another slat, I put it beside it, and that's what gives me the gap. I then take my nailer. It's a 18 gauge nailer. It's a brad nailer, nearly a brad nailer. And then I fire one in on an angle. Sometimes I fire them in and then I fire them in this similar location on an angle. But when I'm going down to the next location, I'm going to fire it in the opposite angle. It's simply because if they're fired in directly straight, you can just pull them out. There's not a lot of holding power because it's just a small brad, or just a small nail. But if you angle them so they go into the wood like one direction and then another direction, it's a lot harder to pull out. And I actually completely forgot about it. When I put the first one in, I pulled the piece that I was using in between and it kind of both fell out. So I had to then swap to a longer brad. It also meant that I could be a little bit more finicky with getting those brads in the right direction. Nails, I'll say it properly. Now I've moved on to the fence part. I did actually look at all of the slats and make sure that they were all the ones that I wanted to use. I didn't want to use ugly ones, or and I tried to keep it so that there wasn't a great contrast between all of them. And then I just fired away. You probably noticed that I have a number of Ryobi tools. When I first started woodworking or DIYing, I bought a number of Ryobi tools because they were so much cheaper than everything else. They weren't the cheapest in the hardware store. They were kind of like the second cheapest. I ended up buying a biscuit joiner. This is a biscuit. It's not edible. I bought a Ryobi biscuit joiner, and it was probably the third or fourth tool that I bought from Ryobi. I'd already bought the belt sander and the sander and the table saw, and so I continued buying Ryobi because they seemed to work. But this biscuit joiner was so bad, it never could align properly. And it wasn't so much where on the piece of wood that it would align, it was actually its orientation. Sometimes it would be angled down and angled up, and so when you put the biscuit in the wood, instead of going in dead straight, it would go in like that. So then when you tried to put the other side in, it never worked. So at that point I thought, okay, maybe I should just stop buying Ryobi tools and buy Makita tools, because I prefer Makita tools. I had Makita drills, so then I've basically been buying Makita tools since then, and I haven't had any problems with them at all. They're actually really good tools. And so we are now finished with the I was about to say shed then. We are now finished with the gate and that small fence. There are a few more things that I put on here for the client. They wanted a capping along the top of the fence and a capping on top of the post, which funnily enough I haven't yet done because I haven't been able to figure out how to get it in the shape of all the rest. I've also painted along the tops as well, because it is in an area where a lot of leaves fall, and so that means a lot of debris, and then if you add debris and water and heat, you're going to get an accelerated amount of rotting. So by sealing the top of it, it's going to reduce it a lot. A lot of the times you'll see on some posts, especially here in New Zealand on fence posts, they cut the wood at an angle, and that's to stop sitting water, because sitting water at the top of a post means that could soak in to the post and start that rotting process a lot quicker. But you can also cap it with either another piece of wood or a small amount of paint. And then I just act silly once again. And that is the end of the gate. There is a few more things to do, but I'll show you that maybe later. It doesn't have to be in this episode. Overall, this was quite a simple project to do. The client didn't quite know what they were after. They definitely wanted a gate, and we talked about different options, especially which way the gates opened. And there's also a lock on the gate, and it's further down the other side. Next week we're on a totally new project. In fact, it's sitting right in front of me, which you might have seen in some of the past videos. And zoom in. Oh yeah, this week. So next week I'll show you how I did it. When the water comes, and it always comes, it always rains. I hope you have enjoyed this week's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.